Friends and fellow citizens, we have made 11 years of rapid progress, the result of an intense striving, people determined to get things done. Sometimes I think some parents are too demanding of their children. Hence, from time to time, even in school examinations, when they fail to meet their expectations or their parents' expectations, you find young people committing suicides. A strange phenomena. In the university, it's understandable, but when it happens in school, I think parents are pressurizing their children too hard. No man, no woman can do more than his best, and to do your best is the limit. Now, these 11 years have wrought great changes in our society. Changes in dress styles, which are obvious, in spending habits, which are fairly obvious, but more important, in attitudes towards the kind of jobs people want. Now, so long as our investments were flowing in at the rate they were in 1973 before the oil crisis, nearly $1,000 million for that year, then we can meet these rising aspirations. But since that oil crisis has gone down, 74, 800 million, 75, 400 million. First half of this year, 76, slightly less than 200, but picking up, probably the same as last year. Which means that in 3, 4, 5 years' time, we will feel the slowdown. Which means it is absolutely essential that we keep wages fairly stable, probably 5, 6%, maybe 7% if we do well, per year. But there's another problem. Certain jobs are not considered desirable because workers prefer less pay and better conditions of work, like air-conditioned hotels, shops, offices, to climbing up a multi-story building under construction. We've got to try and change these attitudes. It's not going to be easy because it's not just the attitudes of the school, of the teachers, but attitudes of the parents, the expectations that's being primed into the boy or the girl. Now, if it is so, if it continues to be so, then we'll have to change our policies, because we just can't afford to be a training ground for work permit holders. And if you leave it to the contractor, then the contractor will always get you raw recruits. They learn, whether it's bricklaying, plumbing, fixing electricity wires, switches, and after 3, 4 years, when they are skilled, they go off because they can get better pay, they are fully trained, and the contractor brings a new lot in. Now, one way out would be to say, right, fully trained, permanent residence granted. After 10 years, he gets citizenship, which means from the moment of permanent residence, he begins to start his family. Either he marries here or he brings a wife here, which means a responsibility on all of us, because as from time to time we go through a recession cycle, you can't ask them to go home. You've got to carry them. Now, if this is the only way we can get skilled workers in several sectors of our economy, then it has to be so, and we'll just have to have a lower birth rate. Maybe that is a better way out. But we cannot have the luxury of choosing our jobs or getting our children primed to the kind of jobs we think they ought to have, not the jobs that are waiting to be done, and not pay this price. We can put up with a lot of the differences in attitudes and lifestyles because, by and large, it's a striving population. The competition is intense. But I think it's necessary for us to remember that there are special constraints on Singapore. We do not have natural resources. What we've got is an excellent geographic position. And to use that requires good organization, good infrastructure, which is improving every day, getting better every year, whether it's harbors, roads, airports, cable, telexes, satellites, a lot. And a constant input of better industries, higher technology, higher skill content, which means better trained workers, better educated workers. Now I come to the question of education. This is an emotional and a political issue, and also one which has tremendous economic consequences. Part of the problem why many of these skilled jobs have now to go to work permit holders is because they used to be performed by Chinese school graduates. They were the skilled workers. The Chinese school, primary school graduate became the skilled artisan. Now, parents have decided that their children will also be technicians and engineers and have sent them all into the English schools, nearly all. So fast that we are now faced with a shortage of English language teachers in the schools for Malay children who used to go to Malay schools, Indian children who used to go to Tamil schools, and Chinese children who used to go to Chinese schools. How do you tackle bilingualism? Because the other one is to satisfy the emotions. You don't want to anglicize your population. Well, and for the Chinese, it's particularly hard because it's a completely different language, it's a completely different script. And worse, Many speak dialect at home. So in fact, it's not bilingualism, it's trilingualism, or 2.5. And it's a very complicated business. And so I was stressing in Hokkien just now how important it was that parents should try and minimize the burden, the load on their children by switching or encouraging them to switch either into Mandarin or into English when they speak to their friends and even to their parents at home. You take off the load, an unnecessary load. It was going to take somewhere around 5, maybe 6 years before we sort out the shortage of English language teachers. And it's all the way. It's not only in primary school, there's a shortage being faced in the secondary schools, and it's a problem all the way up till university. In the University of Singapore, they have to run special English remedial classes because so many of the products, not only of the English language schools, but also the Chinese language schools, do not have their graduates, do not have their A-level students going into university with an adequate command of both the spoken and the written language. Maybe in 10 years we'll solve this, but it's got to be resolved because I see this tendency as irresistible. Now, because of our special constraints, when people come to invest here, first thing they look for is political stability. Effective and honest government, good infrastructure, and workers, eager to learn, productive. Well, political stability there is. But don't take it for granted. If you cast your mind back to 1953, from 1953 to 1963, it was one series of strikes, boycotts of examinations, students in sit-ins, endless ferment, because the communists were manipulating the United Front, the political parties, the students, the unions. Now we've simply got to make sure that this free, self-formed groups from South Peninsular Malaysia who send their cadres down here to start. They come down often. Middle school graduates or even university graduates slip in here as construction workers and start recruiting. They want supporters. And some of the malcontents, they join them. And we've got to keep this thing down. And there's no other way. Because once you allow them that freedom of movement, once they have built up a united front, then it's very messy trying to keep it under control. It's far better we keep them in check. And the unions are absolutely critical. You know what happens in Italy and the lira. You've got a Christian Democrat government, you've got the communists in charge of the unions. The result is the lira keeps on going down. 600 plus lira to the dollar. Then you find big strike coming up, lira floats down further. Same problem, not as grave, but basically the same problem in Britain. Whether you have a conservative or a Labour government, some of the key unions have got very powerful communists. The government has one policy, the unions have another. The result is the pound floats downwards, the economy suffers. The one country in Western Europe which doesn't have that problem is West Germany. Whether you have Christian Democrats or Social Democrats, you've got in the unions Social Democrats in charge, wanting to work the system, not to wreck the system. So the lowest inflation rate of any country in Europe and the best growth record. And that's a lesson we better learn and never allow that's the Italian kind of situation, or worse, the old Singapore situation of the 1950s to come back. There are very few problems which we cannot overcome. Except this higher expectations of every year, life getting better, wages getting better. And this cannot be if there's a slowdown in the kind of industries we get in. Today, the unemployment is negligible. On paper, in the books of the Labor Ministry on what they call their live register, it's 35,000, gone down by 8,000 from the middle of last year to the middle of this year. And the CPF showed an increase of 73,000 jobs from last year to this year. So I can't square this figure. We had 43,000 unemployed last year. We created 73,000 jobs, and that's recorded in your CPF, which cannot lie, and we've got 35,000 looking for better jobs. Well, so be it. Housing is entering a different phase. From one of quantity, now you have a problem of quality. 220,000 units, half sold on the ownership plan. 76 to 80, we are building another 150,000 units, 80% will be sold, 120,000. By then, 70% of Singapore will be living in HDB towns, new towns. 81 to 85 will build another 100,000, will have 80% of the population. And 9/10 of that, 90% will be sold, making a total owned by people who live in them to 320,000. Plus HUDC, some 3,000-4,000 units. Anybody who's working will have a home and own his home. Problem is, what do we do with the 1- and 2-room flats of our poorer days? You know, no Singaporean ever buys a 2-room flat. See, he thinks big. He may live in a 2-room flat, he won't buy one. He's quite convinced he can do better, and maybe that's good. Well, we'll convert the 2 rooms into 4 rooms and use the piling that's gone in, and the 1 rooms into 2 rooms. But anyway, some reconstitution must be done. This is a qualitative change. And of course, we face new problems in transportation. We are solving it for the time being. I say this very guardedly because the ALS area can only take 250,000 jobs comfortably. After that, if it goes up to the maximum, if all the urban renewal projects, all the new offices sprout up, it goes up to 290, 300,000. Well, that's a monumental jam. Even buses alone will jam. They have worked it out. They tell me there's not enough turning around time. So we go into the underground, MRT. And let me tell you how much it costs. From Jurong to the town, from Bedok to the town, from Ang Mo Kio to the town. It will take 10 years to build, and will cost more than $4,000 million. Now, I don't mind $4,000 million if at the end of it all is going to make a good return, like we moved the airport from Paya Lebar to Changi. We're going to spend about $1.8 billion, maybe $2 billion, $1,000 million before we're finished. $500 million more than if we stayed in Paya Lebar and built the second runway 1 mile nearer town. And then you'll have the aircraft zooming up and down round the clock, hitting the town even during working hours. So we say, right, worth the $500 million because at the end of it, everybody benefits, and it's going, I hope, to pay a return. But this underground, having been built, will cost, if you pay for the capital expended, amortization and the rest of it, will lose $70 million a year in 1992 or 1995, whether you start building in 82 or 85. So I asked, I said, well, how is it Hong Kong can make money? Because obviously they can't lose money, it's a private enterprise effort. Well, the answer is we are not as densely packed as Hong Kong. So perhaps we should all live more densely packed, more green spaces, and the underground can make money. But I think some of the MPs may lose a few votes. So this is a new problem, concerned with the quality of life. But when it comes to not just a massive capital investment, but an annual subsidy of 70, and then you add another 7% for inflation each year, well, we've said, look, let's rethink this problem, see how we can postpone the decision. That's all we can do, postpone it, but it must be taken because I do not see how you can have intense urban development without a mass rapid transit system. We have done well, and I hope we'll make the effort and do better. So many of us take Singapore for granted. When it's not clean, somebody writes to the newspaper and says, dust. Why not get the earth lorries to take another route? It's dirtying up my house. I sympathize with that point of view, provided not too much cost is involved in diverting the lorries. When things are going well, nobody questions the amount of effort it takes to make sure it's going well. I think this is the only city that has cleansing 7 days a week. Your garbage is collected every day, including Sundays and public holidays. It's not done in many parts even of the developed world. And you require that drive in the man in charge of the outfit, in the Environment Ministry, the chap in charge who gets the workers, who gets them out. You want the place green, you want roads, new roads to have trees, you've got to have trees, saplings planted, people there studying how the aeration of the roots will take place. All these things, a clean, green, orderly Singapore is just there. But when you leave Singapore, those of you who do, I think that's when you appreciate and say, perhaps it's not so bad. Those who travel understand this, and more are traveling, and I hope come back determined to keep Singapore this way. Because any other way it'll be a pity. A whole generation has striven since the 50s to make Singapore what it is today. A younger generation is taking this as norm, and I hope will lift it further up the face of the cliff. And for that, you need to have people with determination, ambition, and high expectations, and the will to work to achieve the expectations. Thank you. My best wishes.